Township Board of Supervisors, September 20th, 2018. Board of Supervisors, please rise for the pledge of
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Folks, I'll ask you to please silence your cell phones. And a reminder, a notice to all of you that you may be recorded via audio or video by other members of the public, since this is an open public meeting. Also, it might interest you to know, this is the first meeting that we're having that's actually being live streamed. So smile to the camera if you come up, you're being seen live. The next item on the agenda, well, actually number 4, we went through the first 3. Sunoco Mariner 2 update. Mr. David Bruman will give us his update. Mr. Bruman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It doesn't look like my mic is working, so if anyone can't hear me, raise your hand and I'll try to speak louder. As I reported at the last meeting on July 19th, Elizabeth Barnes issued her recommended decision in regard to the complaint brought before the Commission to enforce the settlement agreement. To refresh your recollection, and for those that weren't here, that decision, one, enjoined Sunoco from constructing or locating a valve on what's been known as the Janiac 2 site, or any else in the township for that matter, without the written consent of West Goshen Township. 2, Sunoco was directed to supply all engineering drawings and other plans to our safety expert, Richard Kupowitz of Actifax, in regard to both Mariner East and Mariner East 2X, between the Eagle Pump Station and Middletown Pump Station, and specifically the plans to eliminate the valve in West Goshen and what they did in terms of replacing those valves, eliminating the valve 2.5 miles east of West Goshen. So that is underway already, but that's a continuing obligation. And then 3rd, Sunoco was directed to file an affidavit with the PUC establishing that they did in fact locate all those valves as they had testified to in the hearing, and that too wouldn't change without West Goshen PUC approval. So the Commission actually met this morning at 9 o'clock, and on motion by Commissioner David Sweet, the decision was adopted without modification. PUC also directed the parties to comply with the directives of that recommended decision in terms of the affidavit and supplying the information to Actifax. And then lastly, there will be an order issued by the Office of Special Assistance, which I will circulate as soon as it comes out, probably as early as tomorrow. So that litigation has concluded, I think, successfully. The one thing that the PUC did not order was a valve on the SPLP use area, but in regard to everything else, the settlement agreement was enforced. I think that was a good result. You also asked at the last meeting that Actifax take a look at what's been known as the 12-inch repurpose line, which has been applied for, and it looks like it'll go in service in the next 30 days. All of that information has been supplied to Richard Kupowitz. He has supplied to me a draft report, which I've commented on. He's gone back to the company to get some additional information. I suspect that'll be finalized before your next regular meeting. And then, unfortunately, but I think worth noting, Energy Transfer Partners had a significant accident on a natural gas line, which was relatively new, on September 10th in Center Township, Beaver County. The early results of that are that it was caused by heavy rains and a landslide. Spacing on those valves were 15 miles apart as opposed to the 7.5 miles apart, which we were successfully getting for Mariner East 2 and 2X. And that burned for about 2 hours, from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. One home was destroyed, and several high-power electric transmission lines were taken out, which closed a major highway. Going back to the landslide, frankly, if true, and again, this is my editorial comment, it really bespeaks the inadequacy of the siting criteria and the regulatory oversight and lack thereof. And it's really required. So, any questions?
Any questions from the board members? No. Questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Councillor, thank you for your report and your fine work. Two questions. Has there been a letter of engagement tendered by your office to this township? Question number one. Question number two, to this date, how much expenditure this township has gone through your office basically, both in terms of legal fees and in terms of expert testimony and expert report and any other, such as depositions, things like that?
Yes, there's an engagement letter that was done back in either 2015 or 2016, and I don't have that information in terms of total fees and expert witness costs through the various trials. I don't have that with me.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any questions from the audience? Well, I'd like to say, oh, Mr. Casey.
Yeah.
You please come up, please. Thank you.
Just want to give a brief update regarding that pipe that exploded. It had traversed a known runoff region, and the ground underneath of it was saturated ground, so the pipe basically had no support. So that's the kind of things that we're dealing with in these situations. Secondly, I also want to alert both the board and the township, which I think you're already aware of this, but the case that I had regarding the West Goshen sewer ordinance, a determination was made by the Supreme Court. They refused to hear the case, and they remanded down to the decision by the lower court, which essentially puts the ball in the PUC's court with regards to siting. These are powers that they've refused to acknowledge that they have, and now the Supreme Court has said, no, you have them. So any fight from this point forward regarding siting and whatever is now solely at the PUC. The DEP is not the right argument. They are permit approvers. They are not citing and or any other reason deniers. So any fight that anyone may have from this point forward needs to go through the PUC. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casey.
Just to further refine that, that's on intrastate lines, just like the PUC has jurisdiction right now to do the investigation into what happened up in Beaver County. FERC, of course, has approval for inter-state lines. But otherwise, I agree with everything Mr. Casey said.
Quick question. I read somewhere the National Transportation Safety Board was also involved in that. Did you
Actually, best information I have is that, surprisingly, they're not involved in the investigation of the recent explosion on September 10th in Beaver County. Purely the PUC investigation.
Any other questions from the audience? But I'd like to say once again on behalf of the board, job well done. It was a long journey. Yes, it did require expense, but what was at stake was what I believe, and the rest of our board, we unilaterally, together we made this decision, that our very sovereignty was in question when they did not abide by that agreement that was a hard-fought agreement. Whether you agreed with the agreement or not, it was an agreement that should have been abided by. They did not do that. And if we would have let this go, then Sunoco would have done whatever they want, whenever they wanted, wherever they wanted within our township. So I think every penny of it was well spent, and I thank Mr. Broman and his team and everyone else on the Board of Supervisors and township personnel. This battle is over. Hopefully we won't have any other ones, but well, that's all. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Broman.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is item number 5. This is a recently added agenda item. It's the presentation and discussion and possible vote on the 2019 sewer rates. I believe Mr. Murphy is going to be doing a presentation. Mr. Murphy.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. I was here before the township and the Board of Supervisors in the spring of last year, 2017, where we made a request and a presentation to the board to join in with a bond issue. We've been involved in the last 2.5 years with upgrades to the sewer plant. We've been involved in a capital infrastructure improvement plan. It's well underway. We have a number of exciting changes and upgrades to the plant. Some questions have been asked over the couple of years. Well, was it properly managed? Did we do the right things? The basic problem at the sewer plant is that you've got sewer gases that are very corrosive. The plant was built in the early 60s. We had a presentation workshop August 29th. Went through a lot of slides that was available, I believe, on YouTube. The materials were put on the township website. One of these sewer gas, one of the components of sewer gases is hydrogen sulfide gas. When it mixes with moisture, it becomes sulfuric acid. It eats through concrete, it eats through metal. The standards when the sewer plant were built are different than standards that they use today. Requirements for safety are much better today than when the plant was built nearly 57 years ago. So as we go through and do modifications, we have to meet with current code. We also have to meet with regulations from the requirements from the EPA. The 1973 Clean Water Act required a lot of different changes. You see that with stormwater. A lot of municipalities, West Goshen is dealing with that now. It also deals with the sewer plant. Goose Creek is impaired, at least that's what the EPA says. It's not just from the West Goshen sewer plant. It's also from all the other sewer plants and all of the land where you get runoff that runs into the creek. So the point source that's West Goshen is responsible for just a very small fraction of that. We have to reduce nitrogen. We have to reduce phosphorus. Right now we have a requirement to reduce the phosphorus. So part of the bond issue that we requested last year is to pay for the requirements by the EPA to reduce phosphorus levels in Goose Creek. We've been involved in litigation with the EPA for a number of years. Some good news came about last month. We have a proposed settlement agreement that was published in the Federal Register on August 21st. It was supposed to run for 30 days. Today is September 20th. It's now run for 30 days. The intent on all the parties is to sign that. It brings us into compliance with the requirements by the EPA, but it allows a modification to the implementation of that. Makes it a lot easier for us to put the new equipment in and test it over a number of years to make sure we can meet the reduced requirements that the EPA has said we need to meet. This evening, if there are questions regarding the improvements at the plant, the rest of the team is here. Our engineer, Josh Fox, is here. Mike Moffett, the superintendent, is here. Tina Smith, Sean Walsh, Dan Tierney are all here and can answer questions if the board has any particular questions with that. So we're in the middle of that improvement project right now. We've been improving a lot of the sewer plant. The digester system is well underway. One of the tanks should be complete later this fall. Once that's complete, we'll be able to demo the other tank that's there and begin a replacement for that. We've had improvements at the headwork system where all of the product from the township and 4 other townships come in, where it's treated. Some of the plant there, we've run it past life expectancy. There's big screw pumps at the beginning that bring all the product up into the building, into the plant. The life expectancy for the gears there is 15 years. We were able to get 18 years out of those before they failed. So those have been replaced and are in good working order now. So a number of components throughout the plant have been addressed and the improvements are well underway. We have to pay the bill. Last year when we made the presentation to the Board of Supervisors, we had asked for authorization to seek a $20 million bond. The project was not a $20 million project, it was a $27 million project. Because of some changes with agreements with our other municipalities, where they decided to self-fund their portion, we were able to reduce the request of our bond from $20 million down to $17 million. But the overall cost of the project remains the same. It's just a question of who was going to pay and how much they were required to pay. The other 4 townships contribute approximately 40% of the flow through the plant. So many of the improvements, the cost of those improvements is shared by those other townships. Some of the lines that come into the sewer plant are not used by those other townships. The cost of improvements to those or repairs are borne by West Goshen alone. We have a very hilly township here. And the stuff, when you flush your toilet, when you run your shower, when your sump pump turns on, a lot of that stuff runs by gravity, but not all of it. So it's going to run downhill to a certain point where there's a pump station that pumps it up over the hill, gets to the next point where it runs by gravity. It might hit a force main, which are real big sewer lines that, under a lot of pressure, push it to the next pump station so it can get over to the treatment plant and be treated. All throughout that system, from your house all the way to the treatment plant, is about 200 miles of piping under the ground. The sewer authority is responsible to make sure that all that, except the pipe that comes out of your house, once it connects in with the sewer line out in the street or in the backyard or the side yard, then the sewer authority is responsible to make sure that that's in good order and repair. And we are in a process of inspecting those lines and replacing those. Many of the lines in the township are made out of terracotta pipe. It breaks. Some of the pipe is plastic, it's new, it's put in. Some of the pipe is different materials that have been used over the years. The sewer gas that creates that sulfuric acid that eats through those pipes. So we have to be involved in a process to inspect those and replace those as needed. Manholes, we've had a project to inspect and replace manholes. If those collapse, it costs a lot of money to replace those emergency repairs. But if it's planned and you test all those manholes, you see how much longer is it going to go before the thickness of the cement degrades to the point where it's going to fail. We want to replace it before then. If it's a planned inspection program where you can replace as needed, you can project out, then you can plan for those expenses. We have a very robust program in place to do those inspections and identify spots that need to be replaced. Part of the issue that you guys have been living with the last I'd say the whole summer with the rain, when your sump pumps go on or if there's a break in the line, you get a lot of groundwater comes in, all that water ends up at the sewer plant. It gets treated. The plant can treat up to, I think, 6 million gallons a day as about an average. So that takes a lot of energy. We had an old generator there. The plant looked like a giant diesel engine, a locomotive. It was 45 years old. It was not in good operating shape. We could not get repair parts for it anymore because they just weren't making those. It had an underground fuel storage tank, which is not allowed anymore. So part of the project that was to replace that. We put in dual generators, electrical generators. A lot of what we're doing at the plant now is redundant systems, so that if one part of it needs to be repaired or fixed or goes down, that the other part kicks in so that the plant can keep on operating. So we have a lot of, very good technology there. The science is really cool in figuring out how to do this. Mike Moff and his team test every day down there. They test to make sure that what's coming in can be treated right so that when the effluent or the water that goes out into Goose Creek is at the appropriate levels. Well, we've got some fun stuff coming in that's going to make it even better. During the slideshow we had a few weeks ago, there were a couple of beakers of water one was very cloudy and one was very clear. Some of the treatment systems that they have in place, we don't have those in place now, but some of the treatment facilities that they have, or some of the stuff that's being tested right now, not on the market, can make the water from your toilet drinkable. That's amazing. We're not doing that right now. We're not selling the water to Aqua. We're dumping it into Goose Creek, but it has to meet requirements as it goes along. Those requirements have changed over the years. So one of the systems that we're putting in place, it's a COMAG system. It can reduce the phosphorus a great deal. EPA may be coming out with some other things in the future that we're looking at right now. We're paying very close attention. So part of the bond increase was to pay for that COMAG system. I think it's about a $4.7 million price tag on there. So part of what we got the money for last year through the bond issue is to pay for that system. The agreement that we're going to sign soon with EPA, with the proposed settlement agreement, enables us to start that process, put it in place. It'll take a couple of years to get everything designed and put in place and test it, make sure we're at the levels that the EPA wants. So this is the kind of stuff that your sewer plant does. You don't think about that, you flush the toilet, you get out of the shower, you don't think about it. But those requirements that we have to meet on the downstream side are things that the sewer plant takes care of every day. You don't have to think about it anymore. The price tag for that you've been paying over a number of years, $65 a quarter, has been one of the lowest in Chester County for a number of years. It's been low because they were watching their pennies and it wasn't time to replace things at the sewer plant. Yet you run it as long as you can. It's like your house. You don't replace the roof on your house every 5 years. You get 20-year shingles or 50-year shingles or a metal roof. You hope it goes as long as it can. You patch it when it starts to leak. You throw some tar on it someplace. Well, all of those measures are you want it to last as long as it can before you spend a lot of money to replace it. So that's one of the theories. Either you replace regularly as you go along, like you do if you're leasing a car, or you get as much life out of it as you can. Well, the sewer plant got as much life out of it as it can. It was time to replace those items. Replacing pumps, replacing digesters at the plant, replacing gearboxes. All of that has to be done because it corrodes, it breaks down. So there's no technology out there where you buy, you put it in place, and it lasts forever. Things wear out, it's going to be replaced. So we've gone through a lot of numbers, and the formal request that we're making to the Board of Supervisors, 97, and raise the rates to $97 per quarter. That will take care of paying the cost of the bond and a couple dollars more per quarter. The projections were looked at. Robin had Gene take a look at the projections. HRG was involved in preliminary projections and sharing a lot of data over the past year. So that cost at $97 per quarter is still one of the lowest rates in Chester County when that goes into place. There was a chart put up during the presentation on August 29th that showed that even if you take it to $97 per quarter, it's still one of the lowest rates in the county. That's good. So we've enjoyed very low rates for a long period of time. We've got as much life out of the sewer plant as we can out of the equipment there. We've run some of those to failure or close to failure, time to replace, so we replace it. The replacements are working well. A lot of the things that have been put in are up to code and bring in redundancy into the sewer plant so that if repairs are needed as we go forward, it's easy to do. If there are any particular questions, I'd be happy to answer them as I can, or Josh Fox can answer some, and the rest of the team is here as well to answer questions.
Yeah, I'd like to start with the audience questions first. Mrs. Lorbeck, if you could come up, please. Over to you.
Well, I was a little shocked about, the amount of increase, and I think it's important for all of us to know how we got here, because to me, we have to be able to judge whether the people who were making decisions in the past were making good decisions for us or bad decisions, so that we know whose judgment to trust. So my real question here is, when you looked at doing all of these repairs, did you seek competitive bids from other companies, and if so, where are they?
Ma'am, can I get your first name?
Nancy.
Nancy.
Very good questions, thank you. The amount of the increase is what is needed. As I explained before, it's a $27 million process. We did not ask for a bond issue to pay for all of that. The sewer authority has reserves that we've been using. When this part of the process is done, we will have used approximately $3 million of the sewer reserves. The other townships are contributing approximately $7 million, and the bond issue is about $17 million. Whose judgment? We had a lot of people working on this. Whose judgment to trust? Well, that's up to you. We have gone through an entire process for years at the sewer plant. The sewer plant has always had an engineer. The sewer authority is comprised of several board members over the years that have made decisions over the years since 1962 on what needed to be done with the sewer plant as we go along. So there's a long history there, and I believe that each step that's gone along, the sewer authority has relied on their engineers, relied on their solicitor to make good decisions. The process that we went through last year, we sought information from bond agencies and from banks on good rates. We had presentations here at the Board of Supervisors with that. We had several meetings at the Sewer Authority going all this. All those meetings are open to the public, and everybody's certainly welcome to go to those. The meetings that were here, I believe, all are on YouTube, and you can look at those. Several attorneys, several financial people have been involved in the process. The Board of Supervisors has been advised that when they've made decisions, they have the ability to reach out and do their own review on things. Part of the process to get to bond issue involves Standard & Poor's for a bond rating. I believe their judgment is pretty good, but members of the township staff are involved in preparing and presenting the issues to Standard & Poor's so they can make a good bond rating. We have a AA+ bond rating from Standard & Poor's. That's not too shabby. I think the highest you get is a AAA bond rating. So it's just one step below that. So a lot of people were involved in the process. Did we see competitive bids? Yes, we did. All our meetings are open. We ask, as our engineers come in, Josh and Mike can explain the process that we go through if you want an explanation of what we go through each step of the way when we're addressing each part of the project. We have qualified people, professionals who are licensed engineers, attorneys who are well qualified in the process, bond individuals who are in that business. So every step of the way we've had qualified people involved in the process. And we try to get the best we can for the township. After all, everybody on the sewer authority is a resident of the township as well. Some of the things that we do, the first step that we took when I became chair of the sewer authority in August 2016 was to put in an application with CoStars. It's a state-run program where you can buy equipment at a reduced price, up to 40%. So we're mindful of the dollars that are being spent. We're trying to get the best deal we can. Just the other day, we got word that we received another, I think it was a $220,000 grant. So we've had a number of, we've applied for a number of grants. I think we're over $500,000 in grants in just the last 2 years to help fund some of the process. So we are actively looking at ways to find other funding sources for some of the work that we do. Because the West Goshen Sewer Plant services 5 townships, West Goshen is one of those, we've been successful in getting grants from the state for some of the projects that we're doing. So we are very mindful of that. Your questions are very good. I don't know if I answered all of those, or if there's other questions from the board.
I see another audience member question. Kip Stone. Good evening, Kip. How are you?
My name is Kip Stone. My original question was going to be, in business, we use an accounting technique of depreciation so that we will have the capital laid aside to make these kinds of upgrades as required. I didn't hear that go by. I heard repairs, I heard maintenance, but I didn't hear funds laid, set aside so that perhaps we wouldn't have had to borrow. But after hearing Mrs. Lorbach's question, I have the same question. You talked about Standard & Poor's ratings. You talked about various staffing activities. Now, I was in the capital area of PNC Bank as a vice president. I do know how a bond is put out to bid, and I didn't hear that. Thank you. Those are my two questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. We do have capital reserves. I'm not a finance person. I don't do accounting. I'm an immigration lawyer. So I turn to our other people in the township that have experience with finance. We had a bond company look at everything, the township's treasurer review things, a number of financial individuals. We did have presentations by those bond people right here at the township in 2017. We started that process at the Sewer Authority, I believe in December of 2016. During fall, October, and November of 2016, we had made requests to a number of providers to see if they would be interested in providing presentation to the Sewer Authority on bond issues and also from banks. The bond issue that we got was at a very low rate. I think that it was at the lowest you could possibly get when the bond was issued. We got a fantastic rate. But I'm not a finance guy. Dan Tierney, our treasurer, is here, and he may be able to answer some of those questions. But we did have attorneys deal with bond issues. Ben Reed was here, and a number of other professionals in the field. As I mentioned, we do have capital reserves. We have been using those. It's not just repair. We've been replacing infrastructure, capital infrastructure. And we've had reserves. We had $6 million in reserve when I joined the Sewer Authority a couple of years ago. We used nearly all of that last summer. We were at a point in the process where we would have run out of funds by, I believe, August of 2017 if we didn't have a bond issue to go forward with the needed repairs that were there. So we went through the proper process to get things done. The presentations that were done here at the Board of Supervisors, I believe all of those were taped through YouTube. Please take a look at those if you have any specific questions. A lot of questions were asked during those proceedings. And I believe a lot of the individuals who are here today were also present during that. Any other questions?
Ms. Laura?
Am I allowed to ask another question?
I believe so. Okay, pretty sure.
All right. Well, I should have stated my name. It's Nancy Lorback, and I live in West Goshen on Garlington Circle. And when I spoke earlier about holding people accountable for their judgment, I am going to ask you specifically, Mr. Murphy, isn't it true that on March the 8th, 2017, you sent out a letter to the residents of West Goshen requesting a bond and stating to them that this bond that would be voted on would cost them an extra $9 a quarter. And then that bond, that number was not changed when that bond was voted on in April of 2017. So isn't it true that you made a miscalculation?
Yes. Would you like an explanation?
Sure.
Okay. Sean, if you could come up and provide an explanation. Sean Walsh has gone through the numbers significantly. There was an error, and we were quite surprised when we discovered the error, and that wasn't discovered until late last year, the early part of this year. When we had that presentation in March of last year, we had just received that same week very preliminary numbers, and a mistake had been done in the calculations for that. As I mentioned, it was very preliminary in the process, and Mr. Walsh can answer specific questions on how that miscalculation happened. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sean Walsh, I'm the Secretary of the West Goshen Sewer Authority. So as Ted said, what happened was we had asked HRG to do a rate study for us, and in March of 2017, 1st of March, received their draft report. We had been talking about numbers for the overall capital program in the $27–28 million range. It was a little fluid because, as Mr. Murphy explained, at that time we were not 100% sure that the COMAG system was the way we wanted to go to reduce phosphorus. So it took a little bit of time and a little bit of iteration around the scope of the overall program. So the problem was that we kind of knew that the townships were going to make a contribution of about $7–8 million, which would net about $20 million of township contribution to the overall program. As Mr. Murphy said, ultimately it was a little bit lower, but at the time of the HRG study, the mistake that was made was that it was double-dipped on the contribution from the other townships. So instead of looking at $20 million being the West Goshen contribution, they had taken a further $7 million off that 20, and therefore the calculation that was given to us on March the 1st was basically a $13 million contribution from this township. In addition to that, the calculation also included the fact that at the time we were carrying a current bond that was costing about $400,000 a year in repayment, so they netted that off the increase in rates, which is a perfectly legitimate calculation. It just wasn't part of the assumptions that were explained at that meeting. So the net effect of all that is that the actual calculation was for an increase of 13%, $9 a quarter. Subsequent to that meeting, subsequent to that letter, it was presented to the township on March 8th, a week later. So it had not been time for us as a sewer authority to do a thorough review of the numbers. It was subsequent to that, a few months later, in 2017, late 2017, that the mistake became apparent. Hopefully, that's the explanation. Hopefully it's clear. If not, ask another question.
Any other questions? Mr. Husband.
Andrew Husband. My name is Andrew Husband. I live on Boulder Lane. As Mr. Murphy acknowledged, a mistake was made. He's acknowledged that. I hope he's taking responsibility for that. What my question is what are we going to do in the future to have better oversight over sewer authority operations? And what is being done to offer relief from this over 50% rate increase to those on fixed incomes or first-time home buyers who might find this hard to manage? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Husband, for your question. The sewer authority does not run the sewer plant. The township does. The township provides employees who actually run the plant. So there is responsibility there and oversight for running the plant through the township. Township has board of supervisors, township manager, there's the superintendent of the sewer plant. With respect to the sewer authority, it's an interesting function. It's a quasi-municipal corporation, if you will. It was set up a number of years ago. It's allowed by law through the state of Pennsylvania. Our job as a sewer authority is to oversee capital improvements and to make sure funding is in place for those. That's pretty much it. The day-to-day operation of the plant is overseen by the superintendent. Now we have an engineer for the sewer authority that reviews things at the plant. I think there's only been a couple of engineers in the plant over the history. HRG was appointed as the sewer plant engineer in August of 2016. I believe I might be off by a couple of months. They were involved in in late 2015 in reviewing things at the plant to give a report to the Board of Supervisors on conditions down there. And we had Glace Associates, who was an engineer at the time down there. So the Glace Associates was the sewer authority engineer until the summer of 2016, when the sewer authority voted to bring in HRG as the engineer. HRG's got a very good engineering business. They do this work a lot. They have qualified and licensed engineers. Just like attorneys, just like doctors, you have to have a license, you have to meet certain standards for that. They're doing a very good job. So between the sewer plant supervisor, HRG, the entire staff at the sewer plant, they go through the operations, they go through how the equipment's running, how the plant's running, what upgrades need to be done, inspection programs at the pump stations, with the interceptors, with the collection system at the plant itself. We have in place now a very good inspection program. So we have been able to identify what needs to be replaced, what the life expectancy of those different things is, so we can put in a plan for replacement, for capital improvements, for repair of things at the plant, replacement of things. A lot of the fixes to the collection system, to the pipes that are underground, involve and putting in essentially a lining that goes into the pipes that makes it a lot stronger. If you look at the presentation a couple weeks ago, there's some great photos of how they line the inside of the manholes and the pipes to help protect it from that sulfuric acid. So I can't speak to years ago, the program that was in place. Years ago, I can talk about what's in place right now. And it is a very good inspection program, a very robust program to identify current problems and look at where we're going to have problems next year, the year after that, based on the condition of various components of the system as we're moving forward. So we're very responsive to those needs that are there right now. There are some emergencies that have happened. Sometimes it's caused by power outage or a failure of part of the system because something needs to be replaced. Some of the problems we're facing now is things that are flushed in the toilet, these wipings and things, and that clogs up the system and really wears out a lot of things. So there's certain machinery that you can put in place, macerators that grind all that up so that it doesn't clog the system. So those types of things, we're putting those in place now so that we don't have those problems. If there's a problem at a pump station where there's a failure, where it shuts down, where there's an overflow, it has to be reported to DEP. We've had a couple of those, but the team is able to respond quickly, put in bypass pumps, fix the situation, apprise what needs to be done so any overflow is minimized, and the goal is to prevent all of that. So as part of the upgrade for the system, we've been identifying ways to hook up bypass pumps a lot easier and a lot faster. Putting in alarm systems so we know when things are going to fail. Part of the system is to automate that, or not automate, but notify through your cell phone or laptop when alarms go off at the plant, when there's a shutdown, when there's a failure. So that's part of the system that we're putting in place. We're applying for grants for some of those things. So it's a very good program that's in place now. We've had that in place for a couple of years, and we're trying to avoid the problems where there's failure in the future, but there are going to be failures as we go along. It's impossible to inspect all 200 miles of the collection system at one time. You can only inspect so much pipe per day. And the reports that came out August 29th, the presentation was there. Some of that information is provided there. But it's a very good program. When we're looking forward into the future, one of the things that the Board of Supervisors is considering is whether to increase the quarterly payment above the requested $97 a quarter. That covers the debt on the bond issue. But looking forward, should there be an increase to cover additional capital expenses that are going to have to be made in the future? kind of paying it forward a little bit instead of waiting for things to happen and then going out for a bank loan or bond issuance. That's a good idea, but that's a decision that the Board of Supervisors has to make. That's not part of our recommendation. That's not part of the formal recommendation, but it's something we really have to look at. Are we going to wait for things to fail and then go out for a bond issue in 15, 20 years? We've had capital improvement projects at the plant before. I think this is our third capital improvement project since the plant was built in the early 1960s. So it seems about every 15 to 17 years there's another capital improvement project because of the breakdown of the equipment, because of the sulfuric acid and the decay that happens there. So I hope I was able to answer your question, but I think we have in place right now a very good program to identify problems when we think they're going to occur in the future. And the inspection program we have in place now is able to identify the conditions of the equipment that's out there. So thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions from the audience? Ms. Ward.
Hi, good evening. My name is Margie Swart, and I was at the joint meeting at the end of August, and obviously here tonight, and I thought both discussions were going to be about the sewer rate increase and the rate study that was done that I believe was, I don't know, $37,000 to do just a rate study. But both the meeting at the end of August and also tonight's meeting has been about capital improvements. We haven't discussed the rates. How did we get there? How are we charging the industrial users? How are we charging the commercial users? How are we charging the institutional users? What percentage of the sewage that goes through the plant is contributed from residential? Are all these rates proportional? I mean, these are things that the rate study was supposed to investigate. So it's my understanding you're asking for a straight across the board percentage rate increase. But I don't believe that's fair or equitable. We really don't know proportionally the amount of flow that's going through the plant, and are these rates distributed fairly. Also, on April 9th of 2017, the legal notice was placed in the Daily Local regarding the bond issue. 2 days later, on April 11th, 2017, article in the paper or article, RBC Capital and TD Bank, who are our firms here at the township, and the firm that underwrote the bonds, they were the headline, RBC TD Bank among banks named in bond price fixing lawsuit. I'm not going to rehash my concerns. I've mentioned them over the years. We did not have an independent financial advisor assisting us through this bond issuance. I do believe we were taken by RBC Capital in this bond issuance. As a matter of fact, if you go to MSRB website, I hear that what a great rate we got at 3.1% on interest rates. Well, according to the municipal bond website, you can buy a West Goshen Sewer Authority municipal bond today for 4%, 5%. These bonds have maturity rates every year. We were sold on a 20-year bond issuance with a refund possibility after 8 years. Now, I understand very basic municipal bonds. I've read a lot of public offering statements over the years. I believe there are declarations made in our public offering statement that aren't accurate, that are causes for concern. And I could go on, but I hope that you see that even though Mr. Murphy said we did have multiple proposals, we never got another proposal for a bond underwriter. We went straight to RBC Capital Markets. The bond salesman is a member of a Chester County community or Chester County organization that our township staff. These are relationships that go back for years. There are conflicts of interest, and I'm just really disappointed that we are here tonight discussing a close to 50% sewer rate increase when this board was asked to approve and back that bond based off a 13% increase. So I might need to gather my thoughts here a second. And
Margie, you are out of time. Are you requesting another 2 minutes?
yes, sir.
Okay.
I certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
For those of you who are not aware, we do have a time limit for speaking.
So just some research I did on calculating rates. Again, evaluating customer classes and make adjustments as needed. I am certain that adjustments need to be made regarding the customer classes that we have in our rate ordinance, sewer rate ordinance. As well, ensuring equity among customer classes. I did see a figure where the hospital was maybe paying $3,500 a year in sewer rates. Something is off there. We need to look at that. Evaluating the rate design with respect to the percentage of revenue derived from fixed versus variable charges. And implementing rates that provide stable revenues. You know, are these rates consistent with industry standards? Does this board even know what the industry standards are? I believe it needs to know what the industry standards are regarding rate increases before you vote tonight. Also, providing a subsidy to low-income senior uses. I believe Ms. Lasota referenced at the last meeting, there's $172,000 in past due sewer rate bills. Is it fair for the single household resident to be paying the same amount of sewer rate as a 6-bedroom home, 6 restrooms? We didn't look at any of this. Undue discrimination. I believe if you pass this ordinance tonight and it's just straight across the board, I believe there's discrimination in the rates in approving this. So those are some of the things. I hope you would just postpone this vote tonight and take another month or two. Ask some citizens, maybe sit on a task force and have citizens have some input regarding rate increase. So thank you for your time, and I certainly appreciate your added 2 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the audience? Ms. Fernandez.
Can I answer a couple of those questions first before you? Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Some of the things that Ms. Ward raised, I will not answer with respect to RBC and TD Bank and bond fixing schemes. That I can't answer those questions. Reason for the capital improvements, or reason for the rate study, it's because there's capital improvements and we went for a bond issue. The capital improvements are the reason for the bond. The bond that we took out is the reason that we asked for a rate study, because the township residents have to pay that. Second part of the rate study was an analysis of those rates that the different businesses are paying. Some of the questions that Ms. Ward raised are for the township to answer. It's what the rate's going to be, how you're going to apportion rates. Are you going to have it the same across the board? Are you going to have assess a different rate for the businesses? It's a very complicated rate plan that's in place already, and that was set in place by the township, not by the sewer authority. The amount of the flow that goes through the plant, we're able to tell how much goes through the plant and where it comes from. About 92%, this is rough, about 92% are from residents. about 8% from the businesses. So when the rate study was done, those were the calculations that were looked at. Kevin Fox from HRG was involved in doing the rate study, and his numbers have been provided to the township. And I believe Jean has gone through all of those, and I won't answer for her. I can only answer for what the sewer authority is doing. The last part, as far as citizen input, the sewer authority meetings are open to the public. Part of what Ms. Swartz said is a little disingenuous. She has been at those meetings. A number of other people in the room here have been at those meetings and provided input. At all those meetings, we ask for input from every resident. We've never told anybody to sit down. We've never not answered their questions. We've always answered the questions regardless of how long or how complicated those are. So we've had citizen input in all of that. Ms. Swartz was present at those and asked a lot of the same questions. We provided answers. Ms. Swartz was also present when bond counsel was there, when RBC was there, and here, all of those presentations. And she asked questions. Many of the things that she said tonight, she asked questions on those issues at those meetings. The sewer authority meetings are not taped, but the Board of Supervisors meetings are taped. And I believe that if you go back and look on YouTube at the presentations that were made, you'll see that they were rather lengthy presentations. We were here for many, many hours during those meetings. If there's no other questions, I'm done with my portion.
Ms. Fernandez.
Good evening. My name is Christine Fernandez, and I live on Wooded Way. It says here in our beautiful West Goshen Township newsletter that the board will discuss sewer rate alternatives at today's meeting. What are the alternatives that the board is considering?
If we have an opportunity to actually start having a discussion about the rates, we can go into that.
Just about the rates, or is it more
About the rates.
alternatives?
It's about the rates.
Are there any other alternatives that are on the table?
I don't know. There may be supervisors here who want to make those recommendations, but today we're taking a vote. If we come to a conclusion of a majority of the board to increase the rates based upon the amount of homework we've been doing over the last few months reviewing these options and information that we received from the sewer authority that was then utilized to create a 5- and a 10-year projection of what the rates that we agreed to today will ultimately yield in terms of covering the bond payment that we are required to make every year, as well as considering an increase in the rate to adjust for the capital improvements we need to invest in now going forward. If I can just finish with one extra sentence before we move into that section. I've heard a couple different people use the phrase to keep this from happening again, and I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, because I think Mr. Murphy has been doing a good job of explaining what I would have interpreted possibly you meant, which was to keep us from having a sewer plant that gets to the point of complete almost failure, where it's a danger to the employees, where it's out of compliance with federal and state regulations. So if that's what you meant, that is the basis for the reply about all the improvements that were made and the necessity for them. If there's something else you were thinking about, I'm not sure I understand what that is, but one thing I would like to make you aware of is that the effort that this board is tasked with doing now is to take what has been created with these improvements, the $17 million bond that we as a township agreed that we would take so that we could improve our asset. It's probably one of the most valuable assets we have in the township. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through the discussion about different rates alternatives. But we, as a township, for the last 10 years have been spending $65 a quarter. Add $5 to that for the last 10 years and our rates would have been increased to $115. as much as people see this as a surprise increase, it's not a surprise increase when you think about the cost of living has gone up. We've been fortunate. You might find there be some level of criticism for the fact that the sewer plant wasn't operating effectively because it was left, unfortunately, in many cases to the decision makers who felt that it was important to keep our rates down and felt that they had a strong enough staff to be able to keep the maintenance going. But we learned it was too much, too long in the state that it was in. I've been promoting this as a very successful outcome to a very difficult problem for our township to solve. And while others might believe that there were alternatives in terms of how we could have solved that problem, the point of the matter is that we owe $17 million to the bondholders. And we have an obligation tonight, as a board, to make some tough decisions about exactly how much money we think the increase should be so that we can meet all of our obligations. If there's anything else, I don't know if there's anyone else on the board. Chris, if you'd like to
I'd like to give another opportunity for some district. Dr. White.
Good evening. I'm Doug White, West Goshen Township. Thank you, Ted, for your presentation. To Margie's comment about the commercials and how much the commercials use versus the residential. Some of the commercials are small, like my office. We pay commercial rates, but we use a little. So not all the commercials use a huge amount of water that go into the sewer plant. So that's number one. I would also like to say that the previous sewer authority did a great job, and the present sewer authority is doing a great job. No one's at fault. And also, when we consider the rate increase, if we could somehow use some of our savings to offset the increase a little bit and to spread the offset out, as an alternative. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Casey.
If I may, I'd like to pass this statement along to the board members, and I'd like this to be included in tonight's minutes, please.
That's the board's discretion.
Yeah, that's the board's discretion. The minutes are not a verbatim transcript of a public meeting, and it's generally not the board's past practice to attach whole statements to it. The minutes will reflect that you spoke, and will reflect the topic on which you spoke. However, the board will have to decide in its discretion whether to attach a full statement to them.
As far as discretion goes, there's been a precedent. I've already asked for this in the past, and it's been granted to me. You guys decide what you want to do. As far as the statement that Ms. Swart was being disingenuous and that the authority listens to the public, I mentioned last time at the dual meeting that it was voted that I was not allowed to ask Mr. Fox direct questions by the entirety of the authority board. So that needs to be stated. Secondly, the rates need to be fair and equitable. There are specifics in our ordinance 66-23 that lay out how this is going to happen per unit, per individual, so that we're maintaining fair and equitable on our rates. So anyway, I'd like to read this statement in its entirety, and then I will sit down. To the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors, the township cannot move forward with any vote on the increased sewer rates because the basis for this need appears to have been based in a fraudulent act. The materials that I have received from multiple right-to-know requests, along with the township manager's deliberate keeping of information from one request regarding my request for 15 years of communications of problems and concerns with the sewer plant, went unanswered. The manager lied on 3 separate and distinct occasions in under oath situations, denying that requested information existed, to only then be produced after the bond issuance was agreed to by West Goshen Township in 2017. The main pieces of factual information that I have are from October 7th and 8th, 2015. The township received an email from HRD where they stated how HRD looked forward to discussing the operational concerns and the development of a capital improvement plan for the sewer plant on the morning of October 7th. That evening, at the Sewer Authority meeting, the manager and assistant director of public works attended the regular meeting for the authority. At no point during the manager's discussion with the authority did he mention any problems or concerns with the plan after telling the authority members about the supposed employee problems. He is even heard, after being asked by the authority board, if they should be concerned about operations, that the facility was running perfectly. That's a quote. Not once did either township representative mention their dire concerns about the operational ability for the plant, nor any desired capital improvements to the rightful owners of the facility. The authority did ask if they should be concerned at this meeting. There is a recording of this public meeting which I was given. The next morning, October 8th, the manager sent an email to HRG Engineering, which read, "Good afternoon. Dave and I were talking after last night's Sewer Authority meeting about your visit. In order to keep our cards as close to the best as possible, I would desire any HRG employees who will be meeting with us next week or on the following follow-up visit to come in wearing no discernible HRG logo, shirts, cars, etc. We have enough rumors running rampant already, if you know what I mean." Casey Lalonde, Township Manager. Then there is the issue of the authority finally learning about things by West Goshen board member Phil Corvo of an executive session being held at the plant in mid-October. The authority was apparently not told the truth about the reason for the meeting, which is demonstrated by this email from Sewer Authority Chairman Mike Arnold and the solicitor Ross Unruh. I didn't look at this email when Phil forwarded it. If you look at the purpose of the meeting, it would appear that we were misled regarding the substance of the meeting, given the reference to capital/facilities. Ross, seeing you, given there is a note about capital concerns which are ultimately the responsibility of the authority. Mr. Unruh's response, capital facility issues, any idea what that could be?
Mr. Casey, are you asking for 2 more minutes because you're
I will read this as fast as I can. I am not sure anyone at the township knows enough about the treatment process to know about the equipment. Ray, Casey, and a labor lawyer are taking pictures at the plant today. It does not look like Ray has been deterred by the authority letter. Is someone at the plant helping them, I wonder? Ross Unruh. 3 authority members, after learning of this deception, arrived at the plant, but were dismissed because of the nature of the executive session meeting. Also, there is the fact that a capital improvement contract was voted on, along with a discussion of the 2016 budget, which was approved by West Goshen Township at the October 28th meeting, executive session in direct violation of the Sunshine Act without prior knowledge or approval of the Sewer Authority. The contract was signed on October 29th by Mr. Lalonde. Contract that initially was not provided to me through a right-to-know request. It took several emails between the township solicitor and myself before it was sent. This information, along with many more documents and executive sessions which occurred, are basis enough for this board to engage in an active investigation with law enforcement into the desired/needed improvements at the facility and the subsequent bonds which resulted from these maneuvers. The residents and ratepayers deserve this in-depth investigation by their elected officials at the very least before any decisions are made regarding increases to sewer rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Any other questions from the audience? Marcy, we'll give you 1 minute, okay? Real quick.
I too just would like to address the comment by Mr. Murphy about disingenuous. He himself said, I was at those meetings, I asked questions, I made comments. Please go back and look 2015, 2016, not once did they ever reflect in the meeting minutes that I was there and I asked those questions and I made those concerns. Never once. So please don't call me disingenuous or take issue with that. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Now I invite the Ms. Stone. And Ms. Stone, I think you already spoke to, so I have to ask, just according to rules, if you keep it very, very brief.
Yes.
Please, thank you. I'm giving a lot of leeway, folks, because when you raise the rates on people 50%, I think they deserve to have their say. Usually we have just a 5-minute limit, 3 minutes with a 2-minute additional limit. So I'm bending the rules slightly. Ms. Stone.
Kip Stone on Cross Point Drive. My concern is that while I, for one, am not attempting to put a roadblock in the resolution of these issues, I don't know if I was one of the people being referred to. But I do think that it has been a somewhat less than successful process to date. I'm not sure anybody could disagree with that. Well, however we proceed, we could put down a marker here and go forward with a more constructive and more deliberate process than the one we've had to date that's put us in this dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Now what I would like to do is invite any supervisors who would like to make any comments, any further clarifications. Ms. Duntebeck mentioned alternatives. There's been some confusion as to what those alternatives are. I know that we have been presented with multiple rate hike scenarios, different scenarios. One, I believe, just to do a quick synopsis, is to increase the rates to $92 per quarter from $65 per quarter, and that would basically just cover the bond expenses as it stands now. And then the rate that seems to be the rate, I don't want to speak for Mr. Murphy, but it seems to be the rate that might be suggested, is a $97 per quarter rate increase per quarter. That extra $5 going towards capital expenses in the future, so to hedge the cost, so to speak. And then we have, I think, up to 6 scenarios, going up to, I believe, $115 per quarter, or something around there. So there's 118. So there were multiple scenarios to choose from, which are increases. As far as the increase, other options might be spoken to by board members as we go along. So I would like to start from my left. If Ms. Lesotho has any comments or information she would like to share with the board, with the audience.
Yes. So I think as a township and as residents and staff and employees in a township, I believe it's our responsibility to start thinking about the future and thinking several generations down into the future and how our decisions today impact not just the individuals that are here now, but the individuals that will be here in the future. And the concept is called 7-generation stewardship, where it's the current generation of humans that live and work in the area, in a neighborhood, in a city, in a municipality. They take into consideration how they live and work impact the generations in the future. And that could be 7 generations into the future. I mean, we're not going to go that far into the future. We need to think about where the money's going to come for some of these capital expenditures that are still going to need to be made on the sewer plant. The bond does not cover all of the capital repairs that need to be made. We have many more pumps that need to be made and refurbished. We got many more miles of pipes that need to be repaired. And we also have basic, expenditures if, the stuff that we've currently replaced start to break down. So we need to start thinking in terms of that. I realize that the rate increases, anytime there's a rate increase, people don't want, no one likes a rate increase. But we have to remember that the rate increases that we're looking at, if you look at it by day, per day over the course of a quarter for a household, it's less than $1.50 for the entire household to flush the toilet as many times as they'd like, to wash their clothes as many times as they like, to wash their dishes as many times as they like in one day. There could be 7, 8 people in a household, and the impact is going to be less than, and I didn't run all the numbers for all the rates, but it's going to be less than $1.50. And all of that fluence and byproduct and product that goes to the sewer plant is cleaned and benefits the environment. So we have to start thinking about the impact of what we're putting into the system, what that cost is, and the fact that the cost is relatively cheap compared to other, not only other countries, but other municipalities in Chester County. So we need to be open to the fact that the rate may just be $97, or it may be $105 or $107 or $118, because we're considering how to maintain this valuable asset that we have and increasing its value so that we are not put in this position again in the future. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you, Ms. Lasoda. Ms. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and thank you, Ms. Lasoda, for your comments. So, you may know that I have a background in financial analysis and primarily consulting. I did it through litigation consulting, where I was responsible for presenting financial facts, so that if you were being sued by my plaintiff company or I was defending my defendant company, we would look at our problems from a holistic approach. We'd have to consider every variable, every possible gotcha moment. So we did a lot of homework. We did a lot of detailed homework. We did a lot of detailed analysis. I've come at this issue in that same vein of life experience. It's really the only way I know how to solve a problem, which is to dig in deep and understand the details and ask a lot of questions and talk to people who are experts. So I understand the concerns and maybe some frustrations people have with the story behind how this all came to be. Unfortunately, I hear a lot of people tell me say that they believe this happened. They say that they have facts that it happened, and they say they have facts that actually point to some kind of wrongdoing. I'm not an attorney. I'm not interested in really at this point in time worrying too much about that, because what I am worried about is us being able to pay our debt. As Board of Supervisors members, our primary duty is our fiduciary responsibility to the township. I consider the fact that the bond is only $17 million actually a benefit to us. I also believe that it's a benefit to us that the people who are on the Sewer Authority Board are so highly skilled and expert, environmental engineers, civil engineers, and a staff that works there now that are very well suited to do the work that needs to be done. I'm also a big fan of having public entities be able to retain and take care of their assets. I think that what we don't appreciate is that this township has done a really good job over the last 60 years, almost 60 years, keeping the sewer rates low. So we've kind of gotten used to, every 10 years the rate goes up $5 or $6. And that's exactly what happened in 2008. It was $60, it was increased to $65. And as I said, that would mean if we just kept adding $5 year after year, we'd be paying $115 right now anyway, or $105. Do my math. Someone do my math for me. So, the things that we as a board need to consider is that we have to pay this bond. In addition to paying off the bond, which is about $1.25 million every year, we also have to prepare for the future. What we've learned from this experience is that while there may have been some preparation for future issues, it wasn't sufficient, it wasn't timely, and we got stuck with a really dilapidated plant, and we had to make some changes to fix it. I see the investment that we've made in in a sewer plant as an investment in the township. Having this plant, as much as we are concerned about the increase in the prices and the cost of each quarter, the Sewer Authority did a really nice summary analysis of the sewer rates all throughout Chester County. If you go on the website, you can find the presentation that they made, and they demonstrated between what we are currently doing, where we are currently. It's really, really on this side of the schedule. You probably can't read it very well, but we're not paying very much money over here in comparison to everybody else in the county and what they're paying. Then they happen to show, well, if we were to increase the rate to $97, it's going to go out a little bit over here, but lots is still much more expensive. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, which we don't need to get into today. But the point is that we have the bond, we have to pay it back, but we also need to prepare for the future. We need to prepare for the future projects that are already anticipated. Part of the Sewer Authority's presentation was to present all of the things that are outside of the bond issuance. The $27 million that this program is all about, well, there's another $3.5 million, and out to 2030 there could be up to $4.5 million of projects that they know will have to be completed. In working with our finance director, I suggested that we not only have an assessment or analysis of what the bond rate should be, but we should project it out 10 years and look at the obligations that they already are telling us we're going to need to meet in the next 10 years. And some of those include, for example, as Mrs. Sutter mentioned, the sanitary sewer line, which is the sewer pipe that needs to be scoped, like you would have in terms of a colonoscopy, to see if there's any breakages in the pipes, and whether or not they are so dilapidated that we are at risk of a catastrophic collapse. They are currently spending money as part of their bond in order to pay for that through 2019. In 2020, for the next 3 years, we will be responsible for that at a cost of $315,000 a year. There's a multi-sensor inspection robotic tool that's going to be used in order for them to look through the interceptors. That's going to be another $225, I think, for that. And then, as Mary mentioned, there are several pump stations, the locations where water is below and it needs to be pumped up a hill. And they get very corroded, and they're very dangerous during the when there's runoffs from excessive stormwater like we've had this summer. And in doing that, I prepared a summary, and I don't know whether you've been able to go ahead and send it out. And I'd like to share it with the township residents. So if you're not a resident, please don't take a copy because they're limited, or maybe share with your neighbor. So scenario number 1 at the top of this is the Sewer Authority's basic recommendation to increase to $97 per quarter. And I just want to draw your attention to the information in that top level where if we just were to project out $97 starting next year out through 2018, so for a 10-year window, we would be sitting on a $2.7 million sewer fund. Now today, in the column in 2018, it's $4.5 million. So in scenario number 3A, we modeled out the costs associated that have already been anticipated and have already been projected to need to take place in the incoming or upcoming 5 to 6 years, that after those expenditures, the township would have a general fund of $1.9 million. Before I move on to scenario number C3, I don't even know where I went. Yeah. I didn't get my alphabets right. Yes. No. So one of the things that we haven't discussed and that we still need to evaluate as a board is the fact that there are limitations on the bond. And when I mean limitations, they may not be written, but they are part of the township being able to maintain its AA+ rating. And one of the conditions is the fact that we have pretty substantial reserves right now in the township. We have $4.5 million in our sewer fund, and we have another $1.4 million in our sewer reserve fund, which is a capital reserve fund that was from the original bond that was extinguished by this bond. Drawing down our reserves to less than the $4.5 million could have an impact on our bond rating. And it could cause some concern by our advisors in terms of whether or not we're representing a high enough bond rating for new investors. So one option that has been recommended by a board member that I thought sounded interesting, we went ahead and modeled it for the whole board's review, and that is the third item here on this list. The recommendation or the thought was that there could be, a couple years where we just do the $97 and we consider an increase afterwards to $105. That would allow us to maintain a sufficient level in our sewer fund balance to maintain our bond rating and to set the stage in 10 years for whatever possible issues might come down the pike that are still yet to be anticipated. Information that was shared with us by the township staff about the remaining risks. I mentioned the large sewers, which are called the interceptors, pump stations, and regulatory changes. We already know that the federal government is looking at additional waste issues related to pharmaceuticals and nitrogen in water. But the 10-year projection in and of itself is already somewhat speculative. It's really hard to predict exactly what's going to happen in 3 years, let alone 5 to 10 years. And it's my recommendation that we consider very seriously ensuring that we create a capital fund that will set us up for success in the next 10-year period. Because we still have 10 more years to pay off the remainder of the bond. The earlier we invest in that capital fund, the more likely we benefit from the interest. And we also can ensure that we have sufficient amount of money to, if necessary in the future, pay off, be able to cover the cost of some of these unknowns that we don't have dedicated to this schedule right now. Am I finished?
Thank you, Ms. Nutbeck. I should ask, just for the record, the proposal that you're requesting that we approve, specifically, what is it?
I have not made a decision on the proposal that I'm going. I'm sharing my thoughts, essentially, and I'd like to hear what everyone has to say before I make a decision.
Sure. Ms. Lasota, are you on the same thought at this point? Okay. Just a little humor, the colonoscopy and raising the rates 50%. Just like you. Okay.
For solid information given by the other two ladies, I'll pass.
Okay. Mr. Purnell.
First of all, I think there's too much emphasis on bond. I think what we should be looking at and really concentrating on is the sewer plant itself and what we need to keep that sewer plant running properly. There's a basic cost to it. The $97 unit per increase is actually 25 cents a day, not $1 a day.
Thanks.
Did you see that back?
Well, I'm a CPA, so I check those things. And the emphasis should be on what we need to do the plant. As an ancillary thing, we had to do the bond issue to do the necessary things to keep the plant running. The collection system is also very, very important. It needs to be maintained. We're finding out that certain parts of it are in disrepair or near disrepair, and that we need to plan to do work on them in the future. checking the collection system, which may be in worse shape or better shape, we don't know. So it may require more money, it might require less, and there's an aspect that could be very expensive. So in the future, we might need more money, I don't know that. So I think it's responsible right now to do a short-term increase to 97, and then, but with the idea in mind that probably we'll have to increase it to something in the future, $102 or 102 to 105, that range. So we're looking at something down the pipe that's indeterminate at this point.
May I make a comment? May I make a comment back?
Sure.
My concern, and I thought about this, I have thought about the two scenarios. These Excel spreadsheets I've had for 2 weeks, and I have been able to go into the finance director, and I spent 3 hours with our finance director delving down into the numbers.
If I could say is a wise move, she's very competent.
She is, and you already have a background in it, so you don't need it as much as I do. My concern with doing a small increase now and maybe not doing a larger increase later is that larger increase may never go into effect when we need it. We may not have individuals on the board willing to make that decision. That is a true concern of mine, either because of some tragedy that has struck the board and we don't have the individuals to make that decision. Also, we're not putting the money away into our capital reserve fund in case something does fail. I do know the Ellis Lane pump station had major repairs last Thursday. I am a fiscally conservative individual, and I would prefer to see a much larger, substantial increase now to set us up for the future, so that the sewer plant is just in a better fiscal position, so that the individuals, the management, can start planning for those larger repairs so that they know the money's there. And that's just my opinion.
Any other?
I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to look at all this stuff.
So I guess it's my turn. Folks, I first want to thank all of our personnel and our members for their time and their hard work on this issue. Everybody's worked very hard on this. And it's been a tough problem for all of us. There's no easy answers here. I want to thank you and tell you that although we may not agree, I respect what you're trying to do. It's no secret in the past I've had my disagreements, but none of these folks, the sewer authority, get paid for what they do. So it's something that we should all remember. Mistakes were made, and I understand that, and we do have to deal with this. I believe we all share a common bond that we all want what is best for our township. It's no secret that I've been opposed to this bond since its very inception, and that was over 18 months ago. I feel the need to make clear the reasons why so you can fully understand where I'm coming from. And truth for me, it's always come down to one thing, it's doing your due diligence, checking out all of your options. I don't believe that's happening. I don't think you can make a good decision without checking out all your options. I said this once before, this might be the best option, but we'll never know for sure. Why? Because we never checked out all of our options. So having said that, I'm asking the board that we focus our attention developing options and solutions, identifying lessons learned, and use those lessons learned to improve and not make the same mistakes over again. 18 months ago, basically this board's hands were tied because the vote was already passed. Robin has brought that up. We do have a responsibility about how we're going to deal with this. The previous board voted and approved it. I pointed out several reasons why. Basically, again, it's the due diligence, it's the searching of options. I've heard about the bond bids. We have a disagreement about the bond bids. going to a solicitor and he has two people that he's used as bond providers in the past and just picking one of the two bond providers, I think we could have done better than that. We passed this bond at a very quick speed. There was a need expressed because of the amount of repairs that were needed. And during that process, what we did was we passed it without doing a formal rate study. The formal rate study wasn't done until months afterwards. We passed it without having truly an independent bond counsel for the township or an independent engineer, rate analyst, to look over these things. Maybe something could have been caught at that time. So that was a mistake. We should learn from that mistake going forward. Robin mentioned the artificial low rates. I think that was another mistake. Instead of incrementally increasing the rates over time and not having to take a hard hit as we're taking now, that was a lesson that we should learn going forward. And I think you're trying to propose some things in that regard, so I appreciate that. A bond was given before confirming that our neighbor customer townships were going to join us and participate in the bond financing. That was another mistake. These neighbors refused to commit to this bond, and this assumption has led to the higher increases. And we all know the assertion that the bond was going to be $9 per quarter or less than $9 per quarter. That wasn't the case. So you deserve to know what happened. You've heard some people speak about it. I appreciate their honesty, talking about it and taking responsibility. I also like to say that there was never an asset evaluation of the sewer authority. We never took the time out to evaluate what are we looking at? How much is the sewer authority worth? So for example, if you got a used car, breaks down, you kind of do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth putting all this money into this older car? Should we look to other options? So the first thing I would suggest is getting an independent third-party evaluation, an asset manager or consultant, to help us make those decisions. And that would be an informed decision. That would be a decision that going forward, you know you're doing in the best interest. We still have time for that, in my opinion. We do have reserves. Without going to that level that might be questionable, it's about $1.25 million a year for this bond. We have enough to cover that while we look into these options. I think we owe that to you, the taxpayer, before we commit to any increases. That's what I said 18 months ago. That's what I feel now. Now, another thing that really concerns me, and I'm no math whiz, but it doesn't take an Einstein to figure out that I'm in a minority and most likely an increase will pass. So I'm asking the board to seriously consider some relief for our disadvantaged folks. Now, $1.50 or 25 cents a day, I understand. Most of us in this room, we can handle that, and it's not really going to hurt us. But there are folks out there, I'm telling you, I've knocked on their doors. It will hurt them. There are elderly people, house poor, on fixed Social Security income. They're not getting any other funds. If you looked at Social Security and how much it's increased over the years, it's a joke. Any increase is going to hurt them. So I really think we owe it to them. We owe it to them to check those options out, to see that there's some sort of plan for them going forward. It's very presumptuous just to think that it's not going to be a big deal. It will be a big deal for somebody, and especially since this was a mistake that was made. Originally, it was supposed to be less than $9 a quarter. Now it's much more than that. So I think I would ask the board, no matter what you do, if you would seriously look into that and join me in that. I think that's important. So I think basically you get where I'm coming from. I think that through no fault of their own, this board has to deal with these serious problems. So I would ask you to please take into consideration that this is a problem that was left to us from the previous board. And we are trying to do the best that we can. So out of respect for everybody, although we may have our differences, whatever happens, that's the truth. So that's all I have. Thank you.
If I can add something, Chris, in regards to your relief to the elderly or the individuals, we already have a plan in place that handles that from the trash. I think that could be investigated easily and possibly even combined using the same criteria, which would alleviate what you're talking about.
Appreciate that, thank you. So at this point, I guess the best thing to do is to identify what options the board, or at least the majority of the board, is interested in voting on. And have that vote or decide to wait for further discussion, investigation, vote next month. I will leave it to the board. I will tell you this though, it is 8:40 and I will be calling a 10-minute recess in a few minutes. So I will leave it to the board if they're interested in discussing what option they would like to vote on, because I hear several different options being played around.
Do you have a proposed option?
Well, my option is that I'm not going to vote for any increase until we do what I've been asking for 18 months. And we still have time.
You can make that motion, see if it seconds.
I make that motion. I hear crickets cheeping or something in a second. So the next option, is there any other options that anyone's interested in proposing?
I'm going to be very candid. I believe that we should be raising the rate to $100 per quarter. But because I've had a chance to consider another option, if there is no support for $100 per quarter, I would be in favor of the 2 years of $97 per quarter with an increase in 2021, as it is, to 105. I think if we're going to talk about the future, we're going to talk about making sure we don't get in this situation again, we need to focus on building that fund, because we, the residents, are going to be responsible for it until it possibly falls apart again, or if there's another alternative solution is made. So that's my point of view.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Before that goes, before anyone seconds that, I need to ask a legal technical question. If the board votes on that $97 increase for the second increment of 105 to go into effect at a later time, can another board change that at a later date and vote against that 105 increase?
Yeah, this rate increase, if there is an increase, must be memorialized by an ordinance. Any ordinance that the board passes can be amended or repealed by subsequent ordinance. So the answer is yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll give a second.
To which one?
To Robbins, $100.
105.
It's at 97.
Oh, you're 97 for 2 years?
Yeah, well, what I said initially was that it should be, I would like to make the recommendation to 105 for the, just one rate, out 10 years plus. But without any support to that, if not, there's no majority support of that, then I would recommend that we...
We'll move for that first.
Okay, I'll move for that first then, make it clear.
I'm going to second that motion at 105.
Okay, so 105.
105 straight out.
Okay, thank you.
Any last comments from the audience? Okay. All right. Okay. Anybody?
Somebody
You
new.
did a presentation after we were able to ask questions.
I think you still have to do public comment and have a motion for breakfast.
If that's the board's discretion, I mean, you don't have to. I believe that on this topic, the board has provided for more than ample public comment. Again, the board's discretion, it can take public comment at any time during the meeting. If its desire is to take public comment following the making and seconding of a motion, then the board may do so.
Objection, violation of Sunshine Act. She's allowed to speak right after the motion. You are dead wrong, sir. I have it here if you want to read it.
Out of order. You got something to say?
You don't have to object. It's not court.
Legally, I'm allowed to object. It's here.
But we're not in court, so you don't have to say that you object.
I object because this is the language, sir.
And you're out of order because you're not making public comment. You haven't been recognized. Thank you.
Okay. I think everybody knows how this is going to go, so I'm going to get some time for public comment, folks. Okay? And you can all say how you feel after it's done.
Oh, no, we don't have to.
Okay. No, I said at public comment, Margie. I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
I'm going to let everyone comment at public comment. At the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting.
When you pass the ordinance for the 3 minutes.
Hasn't been voted on yet.
I know. I'm just saying the ordinance that limits us to 3 minutes also says public comment will be taken after a motion and a second is made.
Okay, so
that's what our
I'll tell
ordinance
you what I'll
says.
do. This is a very important issue. This doesn't come down the pike every month. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you speak, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Is that fair?
That's fine, sure.
Okay,
I would
go
just
ahead.
like to make a comment that the $1.2 million, $400,000 a year roughly has already been in our budget for debt service. So we're really looking at an additional $800,000 that we need to cover debt service. So that was not calculated in. So I think that needs to be considered. And then also, we have $4.5 million in the sewer fund reserve. I don't understand why we need to keep that. Instead of worrying about keeping our AA, we should look to improve our credit rating to AAA, which is better financial oversight. That's why we get dinged. That's why we're not AAA. We don't have appropriate financial oversight in S&Ps. And then also, we did not take into account the sewer authority generates anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000 a year that is to be allowed to be used towards debt service. We did not consider any of those funds into these rates. So I just want to point out those few comments. Thank you.
Very much, Ms. Ward.
I just would like to comment in response to you. The sewer authority's reserves are being utilized to complete the project. Okay, tapping fees are a primary source of their revenue. We as a board and we as a township are responsible for paying sewer rates. So, and as I said earlier in this my conversation, if we tap into our reserves and we draw them down, it will have an effect. Well, Margie, we will make sure that we have a presentation then another time, because I am not a bond counsel and I don't know all the details. But it's very important for all of us and all of you to hear the facts straight from the people who are the experts. Because I have been working for the last few months to get my head around this. And we would be putting ourselves at a disadvantage from a rating standpoint if we draw down only on those reserves and do not replace them. And that summary that I shared with you, it shows how quickly we go into a deficit in terms of the differential between the revenue we're bringing in and the cost that we'll have to pay to keep the plant operating.
And may I just comment on that sewer fund reserve of 4.5? That is an operating fund. It is used to run the sewer plant. It's used to pay employee salaries, their benefits, their insurance, maintenance, and utilities. It cannot be used for capital improvements. It's day-to-day operations. So even though it's there, it's not to be used to pay off the bond.
My name is Maxine Richter, and I am a resident of the township. I'm a senior citizen. I live on a fixed income, and I received, like everybody else, a huge rate increase in my car insurance, in my homeowner's insurance, in the water bill, and now the sewer bill. Now I'm going to surprise all of you by saying that I agree with Robin that I think that the board should seriously consider the $100. It will hurt for a while, but we all get, or some of us get, in cost of living increases. In the past, they have been very minimal. In the future, because of the stock market going up and our country's doing a little bit better financially, the pain will lessen because of the inflation factor and our raises on our pensions and whatever. That's called the cost of money or the inflation factor. If we take the bite now, then it will not, in 5 years, 3 years, it will not even seem as though it makes any difference in our bills that we're paying. That's a hard concept to grasp. However, it is true. With the proviso, though, that the extra money does go into an account to avoid the same thing in 15, 20 years from now, that we're not facing this kind of a rate increase in order to pay for the same type of capital improvements that we are facing now, and the improvements need to be made because of fair wear and tear, because of technology, and because of different regulations on the purification of wastewater, etc. That just like the overhead plan for a condo, the reserve is there. And that's where I think you're talking about the money being put into that account, so we don't have to go through this again, that we would be looking after the children. And I don't have any children, so I know you all do, and there are children here, that they don't have to suffer what we are going through right now. That's what you call, there's short-range planning, mid-range, and long-range. And that has not been done in the past, and it's rarely done in government because there's so many changeovers. I think this board is looking forward to the future and trying to do their best for short-range, middle-range, and long-range planning, and that's to be commendable. Now, it will hurt our little pockets for a little while, but we will get raises, and it won't hurt so much. And if it does hurt, maybe we can make another referendum and change it. I don't know the legality of that, but I am certainly for the $100 or maybe even a little bit more in order to assure that in 15, 20 years, when this happens again, we do not have to go through this pain, or our children don't have to go through the pain, or the grandchildren, or whoever follows in 20 years. That's about all I have to say.
Any other questions, sir?
BoS, Barry, Sunshine Act.
Excuse me, sir, may I ask you, are you a resident of this township?
I am not a resident.
Are you a taxpayer?
I am a taxpayer of Commonwealth. I'm allowed to speak.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
I'm absolutely
no, you're
allowed
not.
to speak.
Mr. Chairman, the Sunshine Act, as Mr. Rabari has cited and has waved in our faces, states that public participation shall only be made available to residents or taxpayers of the political subdivision in which this meeting is held.
Well, Mr. Senator, that would...
Pay sewer rates.
Hold
He
on.
lives in East Goshen, he's not a taxpayer. Is he a resident or a taxpayer? He's neither. Okay, so Mr. Rabari, with all due respect, I'm sure the chairman will allow you to speak, but don't wave the Sunshine Act in my face and tell me that I'm illegal and I'm out of order when you don't even have a right under the Sunshine Act to speak. I'll defer to you, Mr. Chairman.
It's been our usual practice to let folks in neighboring townships speak. However, Mr. Rabari, as I told everyone else, I would ask you to make it brief. It is getting late.
I have always been brief within the limits.
Yes, sir.
Sunshine Act, Section 710.1, subsection C, objection. Any person has a right to raise an objection at any time to perceived violation of this act at any time, at any meeting of the board or council of the political subdivision or an authority created by political subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you. Duly noted, sir. Any other questions? Ms. Stout?
Linda Stout, Spring Court. I understand that this work needs to be done. However, living in West Goshen Township for about 15 years, I met a lot of people, and probably a lot of you guys can afford the increase. I know I can afford it. However, you got to look for the whole bunch of citizens in West Goshen. I know several seniors that I'm friends with that live in West Goshen and other areas. They're on a fixed income.
To get a bill from $65 to any increase would be a big hit for them. They have to decide if they can pay. You know, everything gets an increase. Okay, you're going to get an increase, but to go to the highest increase and that much of a jump for seniors, everybody can't afford it. They either have to pay their food, prescriptions, whatever it is. They have a certain amount of income. To get real, their Social Security doesn't go up that much every year, so it barely pays for extra funds. Maybe you're fortunate, maybe a couple other seniors are fortunate, maybe they had a better job, they get better Social Security, but they should start, get the problems fixed, go to this, what is it, $97, maybe a year or two later. If they have to get the stuff done, then increase it. But to start up high and put it in the capital fund, I don't think it's fair to the seniors and the people that pay the taxes in this township.
Thank you, Ms. Dowd. Any other questions? Ms. Fernandez?
Do I need to restate my name? No. Okay. I guess my question is why are we rushing into this vote? Lessons learned would dictate that we take the time to look at alternatives, which I know I'm fixating, but that's what it says. And I understand that it can be interpreted differently. Rate alternatives could mean $97 or $105. I get it. But here's the deal. What is the rush? I'm fiscally conservative as well. I respect that. I'm not reckless with money. I understand that this board's hands are tied. We have to pay our bills. I get it. What's the rush? Why can't we wait 1 month, possibly 2, and do some homework?
Well, to be basically very straightforward, we have been doing our homework for the last year. Mary and I have been tag teaming at the Sewer Authority. I'm a liaison on the board, and as I shared earlier in my comments, that I spend a fair amount of time talking to people about what's going on with the plant, what we're spending money on, how the bond has worked, the work that's being done within the cost constraints. The reason you might see this as a rush is that we've actually been talking about this, and we have been preparing for this moment for the last 3 or 4 months. In June, the Sewer Authority made their recommendation, and the board has been advised of that, was advised about that in June. And in July, we talked about it again in our public meeting, and in August again, we talked about it in our public meeting. Because the reason we are working to get it completed is because we have residents and taxpayers and commercial and church and hospitals that should be notified in advance of the increase. And to do that, we need this township staff. And this time of year is budget season. And it is a very difficult time to continue to add more and more responsibilities into township staff when this is already a very busy time for them. So we've recommended that we have the vote today so that by October, November, December, that information will be shared with the residents so that they did not get their first bill and be in sticker shock. And they would know in advance what it was going to be. So I know, I'm not sure, are you talking about alternatives or rates? You mentioned alternatives.
I guess I must have misinterpreted this. I interpreted this not as 97 versus 105. I fully understand that's what you meant. But I guess I interpreted this as options to a rate increase. For example, I don't expect this board to want to spend money on, borrow money from that, non-capital fund or whatever. I'm not a financial person, but I guess I thought that if you waited a month or 2 and did the necessary homework in terms of seeing what our alternatives are. There was something that Chris Kelly talked about a it's not a formal rate study, it's something else that can be done to see whether or not this is the best option, right?
So are you referring to assessing the value of the sewer plant and selling it?
I think that what it was, since I brought it up.
Possibly. It had to do with the video.
The way it was an independent, and I put this to the board.
No,
I
we're
put this
not.
forward a few weeks ago. I said we should do an independent asset management evaluation.
That's it.
And consulting.
He just mentioned that,
as to what our assets are and what a third party, an independent party would recommend, and then go from there. I understand about doing homework. I think that's homework. 18 months ago, I asked for that. We've never got that. So that's the kind of homework I'm talking about. I appreciate your homework that you guys are doing about the different bond rates, and you've decided that that's what you want to do. We can agree to disagree. But that's my problem. That's why I voted no 18 months ago to this bond, and that's why I'm going to remain consistent. And my duty to each and every one of you, and vote no again. That was the point. And I think people were referring to this letter from the township supervisors. And it says at the end, in highlight, the board will discuss the sewer rate alternatives. So I can understand where people would have a different definition as to what those alternatives really were. At the September 20th to 2018 Board of Supervisors meeting, it does not say anything about voting for a rate increase. Thank you.
I think it was misleading. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so we have a motion. Yes, sir.
I know one of our residents made a mention about the COLA increases with Social Security. Now, I've been on Social Security for 6 or 7 years now, and this past year, my Medicare actually went up more than my Social Security increase. So anybody, I'm speaking on behalf of the people that are on Social Security, retired people, that you don't get as much as you think when you, and especially this year, I think they're talking about 2.1% increase, which is minor compared to what the cost has been going up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. White, and I think we're going to cut it off at that point, folks, because we're a little after 9 o'clock. We're going to take a 10-minute recess after this, after the vote, actually.
Okay, thank you. Real fast, Doug White, West Goshen Township. Okay, the $92 is the base rate to pay off the debt. Then the 97 creates a CRF to give to the sewer authority for the capital improvements. Now, Mary's right, the $4.5 million is an O&M fund. So the township pays to operate the sewer plant. The sewer authority pays for these capital improvements. So the $92 plus something can go into a CRF to give to the sewer authority to, as Mary would say, take care of the future. But it's possible to still need to do a bond issue later. And if this rate that we go to, whatever it is we go to, may support another bond issue later without another rate increase, depending on how that bond is structured. So, is that true?
That's way too expensive, though. To redo it's just not practical.
Well, yes. I mean, it does cost, but we can have the CRF. It may pay for future things, it may not pay for all of them. So, a bond issue later is not totally out of the question. So, it's just some thoughts, but thank you.
Okay, folks. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those against?
No.
That's the end of it.
I thought I heard another aye.
3-2 it passes.
3-2.
3-2. With Mr. Gill.
We need a poll?
No. Mr. Nick. I'm sorry.
Well,
Isn't Mr. Meekum?
I didn't hear. I heard I guess Mr. Purnell voted against. Mr. Meekum voted for. Mr. Pielli voted against. Ms. Donnebeck voted for. Ms. Lasota voted for. So 3 votes for the motion, 2 against. The motion passes.
Okay, so the ayes have it. I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess. Thank you very much for your patience. And those of you who are on the agenda next, I thank you. I apologize for such a long evening, but